Hey, everybody! Welcome to Dear Asian Americans. Wherever you may be, we hope you are staying safe. It is getting nicer out here in Los Angeles in the middle of April. Don't be tempted. Please stay inside, and we will see each other again when we get through these times. A lot of what we're being asked to do, and a lot of the policies and the orders that are coming, not only from the federal government, but particularly from local government, as the people who are making these decisions are closer to and are part of the communities that we live in. There's been a great number of focus. There's been a lot of focus and a lot of spotlight on local politicians and local city governing bodies and county bodies that are making what I would consider smarter and more thoughtful policies that are more relevant to the communities that we live and work and play in. So I think focusing on local politics is something that everybody should be doing even more of, especially here in California. The city of Los Angeles is the big city, but there are dozens of other um, cities, smaller municipalities, and county and unincorporated county areas that are working in concert to make sure that everybody is staying safe and that we are going to get through these challenging times as safely as we possibly can. And that's why I am so excited to have this guest on. I've known Grace for a number of years. She'll tell you that,
Decades, actually.
well, great Grace will tell you that I was a young college student when she first met me, and has seen me grow up through the years. Grace is somebody that I've seen as, for lack of a better term, just a community leader who is a human at heart, and really has led with those tenets and that moral compass of humanity first, and in all that she's done. She's the former executive director of the Korean American Coalition. She is wherever she needs to be to help the community get what it deserves and do the right thing and stand by the people who need the help the most. This year is a fun year for her. She is one of two people running for the open seat in Los Angeles City's Council District 10, which encompasses a part of Koreatown and a part of West Adams and some of the other neighborhoods in Central and Mid LA. So super excited to have this conversation with Grace. And so, Grace, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you so much, Jerry. Happy to be here with Dear Asian Americans.
It's been an interesting time in our lives, and I think it's a lot of us are going through very many different emotions. The unfortunate side effect of all this is, the unfortunate racism and the hate crimes, and the positive of that, of course, is the coming together of the community to do the good work. And somewhere in between, people are learning or wanting to learn more about where we've come from. To know where you're going, you have to know where you've come from. So, really, really grateful that you've made time for us. You are putting your life, your name, your reputation, your everything on the line to make a statement to the city and to the constituents of your council district that you are the best person to help set policy, to make sure that the future that we have is the future that we all want and deserve. So thank you for that. I think it's admirable and inspiring to see somebody that looks like me, on or names short three letter last names on campaign posters is fun to see always. But obviously, having known you for a number of different years, I think it's so awesome that you're running this year.
Thank you, Jerry. You've hit the nail on the head. COVID-19 has brought out the best in people and the worst. And I've got to believe that the worst is because it's coming from fear, which is always when racism and hatred rears its ugly head. And I'm someone who was here in Los Angeles in 92 during the riots. I was here in 94 after the earthquake. I happened to have been in Washington, D.C. on September 11th, 2001. So I've been at the epicenter of some of America's biggest issues in the past few decades. And it gives me greater perspective on what to expect and what we desire out of our local elected officials. And as an Asian American, the nose, the you can't run for office. You're Asian. You're a woman. I mean, all these things that are supposed to hold me back. ultimately doesn't. It may take me a little longer to say, you know what? I can do this job. I can do this job and I must do this job. Politics is fun. I've been involved as a volunteer, as paid staff on campaigns since the time I was 18, right? And that's more than 3 decades of this. But it took nearly 25 years before I was ready to say, you know what? I'm qualified to run. I can do this. I was really deferring to other people, but it came to a point where it's like, I'm tired of the way we get treated or mistreated.
Right.
Asian Americans are discounted in the city of Los Angeles, where we make more than 12% of the entire population. And in 2015, there was not a single Asian American elected in local city office out of 18 members. Fortunately, we had David Rue, who got elected in 2015. And so we had our first Asian American in more than 2 decades. Mike Wu was the first and only until David Rue came in and became the second Asian American. So, we have a lot of wonderful ideas that we can offer. And the fact that we come from new immigrant status, because I'm a first generation Asian American, so is David Rue. Our perspective on life would be far different from someone who is, let's say, ABC, third, fourth
Right.
generation, or Nikkei generation.
So let's talk about that. I think it's important to understand your origin story of how you became, how the Yu family became a dual culture family of being Korean American. Tell me a little bit about how your family moved here, around what time, and why was Los Angeles a destination?
So my family immigrated to Los Angeles in 1974. My mother is a nurse, and the United States wanted professionals coming in. And so we landed in Los Angeles. We were actually supposed to be in Louisiana, but the weather was so much nicer in Los Angeles. And um, my parents' friends were here in Los Angeles, so they stayed instead of moving on to. Uh, I could have been Grace Yoo with a Southern twang, but every once in a while you'll hear me with a Valley accent coming through.
Well, we're glad they chose LA. What
Same
part of
here.
um, what part of LA did you grow up in? How was the city back then from a diversity perspective? I imagine it's very different than what we know it to be today.
Oh, absolutely. In 1974, when you saw an Asian American at the grocery store or Sears or J.C. Penney, it was time to be like, "Oh my gosh, another Asian American or another Korean American." Um, and even in the 80s, when I was at my brother's college in Colorado Springs, the stares that I received. This is 1984, and people were staring at my mother and me because we're Asian American. My brother and I were at the mall in Colorado Springs, and literally when we're walking down the hall, every head turned to stare at us. This is the mid 80s, and this is what Colorado was like. So I know we've got young folks paying attention and listening in and going, wow, yes, it was a very different time than it is now. We weren't welcome, you know, being called names. And Korea was not a country that was recognized. It was always, are you Chinese? Are you Japanese? Korean? What's that? Right? They didn't have Hallyu and the whole Korean pride thing going on back then.
Sure, I think that's a lot of. I've certainly had to explain to a friend, a minimum of one friend, what Korea was and who I am, and I'm sure I'm not alone. As we particularly look at smaller countries in Southeast Asia, Cambodia,
Right.
Laos, even I bet you even today that most people cannot name some of those countries, nor can they point to it on a map. So I think this show is geared towards a collective Asian American population, based on the fact that we share a lot of collective stories. But it's also important to recognize our individual rich cultures the languages, the food, the customs that I think make us pretty unique. But particularly now in April 2020, some people are going back to the notion that they don't really care what you are and who you are, as long as you look Asian. That we're going to get a lot of hate towards us. So growing up in LA in the 80s, as you mentioned, with not a whole lot of diversity, particularly from an Asian American perspective, um, how did you grow up to care about issues that affect the community and help you grow into the community leader that I and so many other people know you as?
It's just doing the right thing. I think leaders are people who stand up and are willing to do more than others. And I know I just did it because my parents raised me to do what's right always. Also, when I said, "Mom, I'm American. In America, we do it this way," she gave me a lesson really early on in life. I think I must have been in like the second or third grade, and she said, "When people look at you, they will see you as Asian, not as American. They are going to look at you, and you're not the typical Caucasian face. So you will always be Asian. So you better know your Korean heritage." This is probably when I didn't want to go to Korean school or something, right? But it was true. It made perfect sense. When people perceive me, doesn't matter how perfect my English is, that I can score a perfect on, our SATs here for English. It is, you're not American. I've got third, fourth generation Asian American judges who are friends who talk about how when they get in a taxi cab, the driver will ask or comment and say, "Wow, you speak English really good," right? We've all been through that,
Sure.
or most of us have. If you don't live on the coast and you've been in the middle of the United States, you get that response,
Sure.
unfortunately.
It's a weird, well-intentioned, backhanded comment. They're really impressed,
Right.
but
Right.
it's
It's basically we're a foreigner,
sure.
um, that perpetual foreigner. Unfortunately, America, as much as we say we embrace diversity, people are afraid. Um, no, I remember a time when being gay or lesbian was not accepted, right? Now it is a completely different culture where everybody knows someone or has a family member who is gay, lesbian, bisexual. Therefore, it is accepted. I'm sure there are places in the United States where it's still not wholly accepted, but I think we've done a huge turnaround in my lifetime.
Sure.
In the last 20 years, the change has been dramatic. And I would love to see that kind of acceptance with all Americans of every ethnic background as well. That would be very nice.
Me too. And this is not to discount, other people who've had greater and equal struggles, but you know, uh, there's no visible distinguishing factor about the LGBTQ community. So I think that acceptance or progress is slightly different than a racial one, where if you're Asian, you're Black, you're Latino, it's just the way you look, and people will judge you purely based on the way you look before they find out who you actually are. So I think that adds a little bit of um, I guess pun intended, that adds a little bit of color to the discussion of I can't change the way I look. And
Right.
if you read some of the memoirs of older gay white males, for many many years they hid that and they got by in society without ever showing their true identity, even through marriage and kids and other heterosexual relationships, because that was easier, socially more acceptable to do that. Well, I can't pretend to be a white man. So that's a challenge that I think I fully am aware of, and some things that I think makes some things a little bit easier, but some things more difficult when it comes to racial identity. Um, Grace, um, I wanted to, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about was you were here in 1992 when the last time the city of Los Angeles, since just recent weeks, just went in the most oddest or most strangest senses of I can't believe this is happening. Um,
Right.
that was not a natural, incident like an earthquake or anything. Um, we have a lot of listeners who are likely born after 1992. We have a lot of listeners who are not from the Los Angeles area, or perhaps not too familiar with Korean American history in that context. Share with us what happened then and why it's such a pivotal moment that so many Korean Americans point to as a turning point for our community.
Well, you have to understand in 1992, the media played a huge role and impact of making Korean Americans scapegoat. There were racial tensions um, coming from the Rodney King incident, where white officers beat Rodney King to a pulp. And this is one of the few and first videos where this was shown. And when you saw this, and the clips would just see cops um, kicking, beating down, stomping on Rodney King. So there was a lot of anger in the community. The fact that you had all four officers being found not guilty caused an uproar. And when there was a huge riot breaking out, all the wrong pieces were in play. The police chief was not where he needed to be. I forget where he was, but he was not able to be at command center pronto. Uh, the mayor was not around. I forget where he was, but all of this happens in a snap second. And on TV, you see people looting, fires breaking out, and police and fire departments were told not to go in because it's too dangerous. So you had police officers who are sworn to protect and serve, who are told by their commanding officers not to do what they are trained to do. And so when those who were looting realized there was no cop to come and stop them, it just kept exploding and getting bigger. The fires got stronger. And we went from, you know, Normandy and Slauson, and then came up to Koreatown. What I found most disheartening was the fact that uh, Koreatown was allowed to burn. It felt like, okay, you can go up to Melrose, don't go any higher. Don't go further west than La Cienega. There you had the National Guard come in. The National Guard did not come into Koreatown. They took their western border at La Cienega. So when I saw that as a senior in college, it was just like, this is unbelievable. They're not treating us fairly. You protect some, but not others. And I was a college senior, so I left school to come in to help, to be the 411 operator for people who spoke English and wanted to get in touch with Koreans and Americans and see what their thoughts were, media central. So that's what I did. I coordinated for younger college age high school students to come volunteer. It was just doing what we could, making people aware of where to go for federal emergency management service, FEMA services, for SBA loan activities, sort of like what happened with coronavirus
Right.
19. Uh, you also had just complete pandemonium coming through, and Radio Korea was a radio station that really was a lifeline, truly the lifeline for Korean Americans who were stuck behind counters because no one could come and get them out. Um, I am not an owner of a gun, nor do I ever hope to be. I do not anticipate ever owning a gun. But I will say that without the guns, uh, it would have been very difficult to retrieve and bring people into safety because they were stuck behind uh, behind doors, behind counters from all the looters who did have guns. So it was a scary time.
If you've seen any of these pictures, it's a visual that is really hard to forget. Uh, People, particularly with what's been going on recently with the need or the desire to better arm ourselves with fears. People have jokingly used the term rooftop Koreans, and people know exactly what that means. That our uncles, our fathers, our grandfathers literally took guns and took shelter on rooftops of buildings to not just protect their businesses, but protect lives. And it's something that I find fascinating. So there's so many different layers to this. I myself was a 8-year-old, just had moved to America 3 months prior, and so the really unfortunate stereotype and negative image of Black people that I had been told or shared through these experiences was something that I wish I didn't have when I was so young and new to America. That it was, all these quote unquote bad Black people that were burning Koreatown. And obviously the news didn't help in quelling any of those fears. And even to their credit, my parents were also new immigrants, and they only believed what their friends and newspapers and radio and what church folks told them. So it was a, a big impact on my life in trying to figure out, holy crap, I thought this was America and we moved here for a better life, and all this is happening. Um, it's hard to see the positive light in some of those things and to restore faith in the system, or to believe that the system could be better. But that's actually what had happened, because not just you, but um, so many other people, whether it be through governments or deciding to be police officers or get involved in mainstream non-Koreatown related organizations, so that this never happens again. Um, what How did that experience play a role in further wanting to be a voice of the people? Because since then, you've been singularly focused on helping the people of Los Angeles, in particular, Koreatown.
I was just fortunate to come into the roles, but let me back up and clarify something that many people do not realize. And this is where I fault media. You realize more non Africans were taken to jail and arrested, meaning the highest population of the looters were Latino. They were not Black.
Mm,
So when you say it was a Black Korean thing, it was like, no, it was an economic thing.
sure.
When you have a crisis where the poor are continuously getting poorer, they have no options. Gang life seems very enticing. And I'm actually concerned as to what that really means for us right now after COVID-19. Because if there is no hope, if there are no jobs, if the economy is so unfairly set that there is no opportunity for people to live and survive, you leave no options but for people to survive as best they can. And are we setting ourselves up for a potential additional riot of sorts? I am concerned that if we don't play this well by providing the right opportunities, that is exactly what will happen.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
I'm not the only one who, I have a family now, and have worried and thought about extra security at home in a lot of different ways of
right.
setting up communication channels with neighbors and friends near and far in case, for lack of a better term, shit goes down. What is our action
Right.
plan? As crazy as that sounds, it is the reality. And you're right. The media did then, 28 years ago, still does today, play a ridiculously influential role in the way we not only view current events, but also remember history. And even with platforms like podcasts, where I didn't have to ask anybody to do this, we have our own methods of communicating what we believe to be the truth, yet we are still extremely influenced by media. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
and
They're doing a little bit better. As much as there are anti-Asian hatred actions occurring throughout the nation, I also see mainstream media covering medical professionals who
sure,
are of Asian descent, um, talking and touting how great South Korea or Singapore has been in fighting and combating and bringing COVID-19 under control, uh, to highlight the positives that include, not just East Asian, but South Asian,
yeah,
Southeast Asian. I think I really want to say they've done a good job turning it around. But I think it also helps that we've got more um, Asians in mainstream media.
sure. I think it's where two things are happened, right? Of course, the general populace has evolved, and we are more open minded. The people that are making decisions now are, closer to the way we think, I hope, than some of the more, let's call it, traditional mindset of America years past. But also more people that look like me and you and other folks are newscasters, are reporters, are editors,
Right.
are cameramen.
And exactly. And the fact that even in the more traditional middle of the country states have in-laws
Sure.
that are now Asian American.
Right.
They have grandchildren that have Asian blood in them,
Right.
and so it's like, oh well, my grandchild is, blah 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 and blah blah blah, and
Yeah.
therefore, we love and accept people that we know,
Sure.
and so it's getting a little better.
And even, on the topic of representation and being in the room where decisions are made, um, those are, being in the room and speaking up are two different things, obviously. But
Absolutely,
step one is representation. Um, so as you mentioned earlier, from being in the city decades ago where there was no particular Asian representation, now this year, in 2020, with John Lee from 12 with his seat confirmed, and with you and David on the ballot in November, we have the potential to have 3 seats of Asian American descent. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, David's challenger is also of Asian descent as well.
yes.
So either way, we'll have a minimum of two, 2 out of 18 or 3 out of 18, or 1 out of 8, 1 out of 9, right around that 12% number you quoted earlier. But
Hmm.
it's not just slotting in numbers. Obviously, that's not what we're trying to do. It is
No,
to help um, decision makers, not just the mayor, not just his staff, but the residents of the city feel represented. Um, and not only visibly, but to make sure that our voices are being heard. Um,
and that's where we're actually very poor in representing the people. The city of Los Angeles currently seems to have forgotten that 60% of the folks who live in the city of Los Angeles are renters, but almost, I think something like nearly half of the city council members not only own their own home, but they have rental property. So their mindset is far different than the average Angelino who doesn't own property.
yeah, I think, and I've seen and I don't know when people are listening to this, but and I don't want to talk too much about current event, but I think we're doing a better job than most cities. I hope that as more time passes and more um, voices are heard within city hall or at the county office or in Sacramento or, hopefully in Washington, that, more sensible and more human minded decisions are being made to protect the least of us, because I think we have seen, again, unfortunately, we are only as healthy as the sickest neighbor. Our systems are only as good as its protection for the most vulnerable. Um, you have made a career out of fighting for those people, whether it was at the Korean American Coalition, doing advocacy work and helping people just feel represented and heard. In recent years, you were very strong and very representative um, on the issue of homelessness in and around Los Angeles. Um, what you do is exhausting. It's exhausting for somebody like me who cares, but it's not my day job. I read, I listen, I speak to you, I speak to other people. I have a sense of what's going on, um, but it is not my day job to go and fight on the front lines to do what's right. Um, how do you stay energized, and what keeps you going?
I think, as my brother likes to say, this is what keeps me going. This really does bring me joy to be able to help others. I became an attorney because I wanted to be the voice and representative for those who cannot speak out for themselves. Their voice is so silent, they're so timid. I've never been timid, and I'm very non-Asian because I'm very confrontational. I'm very American. It's sort of like bring it on, right? Yes, I do have my Asian tendencies, and working in the Asian American community, I got to share this one story. This was like working with 25 other API organizations. These are all leaders, but they're Asian American leaders. And when we were confronting City Hall for something that they were not doing appropriately, I'm like, let's protest. They're like, "No." I'm like, there were a handful of us who were like, "We need to protest. This is wrong. How dare they?" And then, but 20 or so of the group were like, "No," very silently. "We know they're wrong, but we don't do this." It's like, oh my gosh, right? I'm like, and I will never forget because it ended up being Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2012. We go down to City Hall. The only thing I can have my group agree to is like, okay, can I protest by saying Happy Valentine's Day and remember the API community? They said, yes, Grace, you can do that. So I went and bought some lays at the flower mart early in the morning, right? Nonprofit, always need to save money. Got these lays and then went and put lays on each of the council members saying, please remember the API community while you're doing redistricting. That was our protest. Not these big signs saying, hey, listen to us or don't forget about us, but it was Happy Valentine's Day, remember the API community. Not the way I would have approached doing this, but that was the compromise I needed to do to get the other 20 or so organizations, right? This is what it's like to work with the API community. When we're upset, when we're really stomping angry, we come out and say something really nice and sweet. So they're like, oh, that went really well. You guys were just okay. I go, no, you don't understand. We were pissed. And this is non Asian community members going, you were pissed? You seemed like really happy about this. I go, no, we showed up because we're pissed. They're like, oh, so really being able to decipher what it really means. Those are the kind of reasons why I always end up stepping up because I get it. I know how upset the Asian American community is, but we're not translating and speaking in a manner that mainstream, uh, the greater society looks at and says, oh, well, the API community is fine. They're not, protesting. I love it when I see Black Lives Matter just in your face at times. Sometimes, most APIs are probably like, not the way we would go about doing it, but we understand what you're doing. Once in a while, I wish the API community would really just stand up and fight for themselves vocally, but that's really hard to do.
I think we're starting to see a little bit of it now with the post COVID-19 racism and hate crimes, more so than ever before. I see friends with larger platforms speaking up, leveraging those platforms obviously at the risk of pissing off some other fan base, but you got to do what's right in your heart. Um, I think it's a process, right? Because it's hard to undo decades of conditioning from family, societal, and even religious doctrines to say humility is good, meek, or
Right.
being meek is good. It always works out. Just work hard and keep your head down, and they'll reward you. And we realize that not only in the business sense, but even in the political and the governance sense, that that's not true. The silent often go
Definitely
ignored.
not true.
Um, so take me to the point where you decided that you had to take matters into your own hands and decided that you wanted to run for office. And you made that decision not yesterday, but a long time ago. And this has been a long journey for you. So you're now finally on the runoff ticket, the two-person runoff. So congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
It's been really um, heartening and heartwarming and rewarding for me to see that process play out. Um, you have to believe that the good guys win at the end of the day, and so I, along with so many others, are always rooting for you. But share with us why. Why is it so important for you, and what do you want to do with the responsibility once it is given to you?
You know, I truly believe government is for the people, by the people, right? It We cannot have a government that is for special interests. We need government that looks out for the little guy. Um, and I'm a poli sci major, political science, policy, good government policy is something that I believe in. I used to be an attorney representing abused and neglected children in court, in children's court. And I felt great because I was representing the child. The the one person in the room that didn't do anything but is being affected. Um, Usually there's a parent, a mother, and possibly a father and a social worker, and all of these people have attorneys, and the child has an attorney. Being able to help my client, one client at a time, was great. But I always knew policy where I could affect the entire group would be much more impactful. And that's my training as a poli sci major and just living in the world, knowing that that is how we need to do it. I love the story of the starfish, right? Where some young person is out there throwing a starfish back into the ocean so that it survives. And then you've got some adults saying, "You're not going to save all of these starfish. What does it matter?" And then the young person holds up that one starfish. "It's going to matter to this one," and throws it back into the ocean so it'll survive. Um, I applaud the people who do that, but I want to figure out how to save the entire lot. And so while I'm processing this, it'll take a little longer and some starfish will die, but ultimately I will have hopefully impacted it so I can have, like the 80-90% of them survive. And that's how I see government. Um, Not always quick, as can be seen now with the stimulus package, but if we're prepared, if we really truly look at the way our government runs, take out the inefficiencies, the roadblocks, and the laws that are on the books, even now, that are illegal and have been proven to be illegal because that's what judges have said. Because when uh, regular citizens are tangled up with local government and they take them to court, each and every time they've won on this issue 3 separate times. You would think that our city government would change the law since we've lost 3 times. But the reason they don't change the law is because it allows city government to make use of that wiggle room. And that is why we have so much corruption, the pay to play. And what really caused me to step up and say, I must run, is the city's pay to play culture. I mean, I knew it. I, I knew in my gut, but I didn't have proof. The proof came about with uh, former council member Mitch Englander last month coming forward and taking a plea to his being bribed and fraud and all this. And then we've got another council member who we know because someone else took a plea on this was getting $500,000 in cash to green light and say yes to developments that should never be going up. Uh, I fought one of those developments. There was something fishy. I had actually been paying attention to this for 10 years, and all of a sudden, the city and the mayor are like, no, we say yes. This is a go. It's like, the laws haven't changed. You've denied this 3 times already. Why are you saying yes? Well, that developer offered me $400,000 to go away. And I was just like, are you bribing me? And I was getting louder. Did you just bribe me? So that the security guard came and he went away. But I'm like, wow, this truly happens. It was unbelievable, but all too real. And this is what happens in our local city government. And as someone who's an attorney who believes in the law and what's right, I had to stand up. When the city does these dog and pony shows of, oh, we want your input, please join us. And finding out that I was duped and scammed, and you made me go out into the community, make people come out in the hundreds. Actually, we passed a few thousand, being civically engaged for the first time. And it was all a dog and pony show. I get it. There's politics and everything. And I'm not going to win every argument. And you know what? The people in power have the power, but you got to follow the rules. If you let your supporters cut through the line, not have to wait like the rest of us, I I'm just like at a loss for words because I believe everyone should have to wait in line and follow the process. So that's how I ended up running.
You shared a story of really teaching somebody how to fish and making an impact that is greater than and then one person. I think that is a really appropriate story for you to share because I think whether or not this race turns out the way you want it to, um, the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do uh, has already and will continue to inspire so many others, many of whom look like me and you, many of whom are children of friends of yours and mine, to choose a less profitable, perhaps, but more rewarding, more difficult at times, but ultimately the right path to do what is right. Um, and it doesn't need to be at the highest levels with the fanciest titles. I think the work that you've done and the organizations that you've stood by and ran and continue to support is a testament that two things. One, all of us can make a difference. And two, that difference with the context of us being who we are, members of the community, and where the policies, the rules, the lines in the sand impact directly um, our parents, our uncles and aunts, and our friends and their families. Um, Knowing that, I think, is just absolutely um, amazing that you have played a very, very significant role in our community, in our Korean American community here in Los Angeles, and beyond to really inspire all of us because it's hard to get people to volunteer for political campaigns. You've done that. It's hard to inspire armies of college students to do the right thing and to march with you and to um, do all the things that anybody who is even remotely familiar with you and your work, you've done that. So um, thank you. It is awesome. I am continually excited to see what comes. We have just under 7 months until we go to the polls again. I am no longer a resident of the city of Los Angeles, so I cannot vote for you, but I'm happy to help in other ways. And so I want to end the show in the way that we end all of our shows. And before we do that, I want to invite you to come back as we get closer to election day because I think there are even more amazing topics that I want to discuss with you, particularly given how do you, as an Asian American woman, dare to stand up in a community that doesn't look like you to say that I am the person to best represent you. I think that's a question that is been on my mind and a lot of people's minds as you have had the audacity to really stand on a podium and say, I may not look like you, I may not come from where you've come from, but I'm the best person for you and your needs. So um, obviously an open invitation for you to come back whenever you want. But the name of the show is The Asian Americans, and it is in the form of, as you mentioned earlier too, it is a for us and by us, and really to us and from us as well, and an all-encompassing letter, a love letter to us. So I will start the letter, and if you could help us finish up the show, dear Asian Americans.
It is my hope that you will remember your parents' and grandparents' history and just really shine brightly in our America. As an American with Asian heritage, let's go do our stuff and just shine and let everybody see what we're made of. The generations of love and inspiration, the ability to come back from losses, from just wars that devastated our home countries. Or if you're Nikkei and you had grandparents and great grandparents who were um, survived the internment camps. We have a rich and strong history. We are survivors. We are leaders. And I'm excited for our future generations, my niece and nephew. I know you guys are going to go change this world. And I know my friends' children and these wonderful young Asian Americans are going to just have a future Asian American president. You know, Andrew Yang, you did us proud. Good job. And for all of the aspiring Asian Americans out there who want to go into public office, do it. But that doesn't mean just do it right now. It means put in your dues, go volunteer on campaigns, get yourself really immersed in this, and then make us proud and go run and win.
Thank you. And if you're in the city of Los Angeles, or if you want to help Grace um, win her seats and do right by the people, not only of Council District 10, but for um, all of us who live, play, work, eat, all the fun things in and around Los Angeles, go to our website. It's Grace Yoo CD10. That's Grace YOO CD10.com. Figure out a way to get involved. It's a long journey. I know that this stay-at-home order has impacted your campaigning. Obviously, there's not a lot of in-person things to do, but I've seen you pivot digitally and to try to keep your base of supporters engaged and excited. And we'll see how this all pans out. But one thing's for sure: whether with or without the title of city councilwoman, I know you're still and always are going to fight for the least of us, the sickest of us, and the most needy of us. So, thank you for all that you have done and that you will continue to do. Really proud to have known you and really honored to have you on this show. And we'll see you back on here very soon.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.